Today we will start with a new lesson from your history textbook, Chapter 1, French Revolution. The French Revolution was a milestone episode in the modern history of France. It began in the year 1789 and ended by the year 1790 with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. All through this time, the French people were finding ways to restructure their country's administrative system, a change from monarchical rule and federal system, which did not allow equality, freedom and fraternity to exist in their society. The French Revolution, the first incident was the storming of the Bastille prison, which stood as a symbol for the despotic power of the king. The French Revolution completely changed the social and political structure of the country. So now, in this lesson, we will try to understand and find out what were the various factors that led to the revolution, the causes for the French Revolution. There can be social causes, there can be the economic difficulties of the people, and the political structure or political situations and system that was not accepted by the people. The first one, we will try to see the Ascension of Louis XVI, the King of France. When this King Louis XVI, a member of the Bourbon family, came to throne or became the king, to his surprise he found that France had an empty treasury. This was a big blow to the king. Now from where will he find money to run the country on a daily basis? That's a big problem. So he tried to find out the reasons for that. When he studied, he found out that the long years of war with Britain, France helping American colonies, to win independence. So, they are spending their money to help these people to gain independence from their common enemy, Britain. This added huge amounts to the debt that was already there for the country and which was beyond their financial capacity. The huge cost of maintaining an expensive court at the Palace of Versailles was the third reason. Lenders, those people who gave money as loan to France, these lenders, what did they do? They now charged higher rate of interest on the loan amount, and this created a budget deficit. They didn't have enough money and they found it very difficult to meet the daily expenses. So to meet the regular expenses of maintaining an army, court and government offices, it decided to increase taxes. That was the only solution. That is what happens all around the world. When there is a financial problem, then immediately they will go for increase of taxes. That is a good source of revenue for the government. But this did not give the expected results due to the existing social structure of France. So something was wrong in the social structure of France. What was the social structure of France? The country's society was broken or divided into 3 estates, 1, 2 and 3. The first one included the clergy, the second the nobility, and the third the peasants. So peasants can be landless laborers, the small farmers, then a few merchants, a few educated people. Now the first two, the members of the first and second estates, the clergy and the nobility, they enjoyed privileges by birth. They belonged to noble royal families. So they enjoyed privileges by birth, and the most important was the exemption from taxes. They need not pay any taxes. The nobility or the nobles, they had an added privilege. What was that? They could collect taxes from the peasants. They did not pay taxes, but they also collected taxes from these poor people, the peasants. So, in the French society, it was only the third estate who had to pay taxes. And these people, you should understand, they were mainly the poorless landless laborers or the small farmers who will really find it difficult to pay this high tax. The peasants had to pay land tax. Other than these land tax, they were also asked to pay a tax called tithe to the church, and a tax to the state called taille, and an indirect tax on all articles of daily consumption. However, they could be burdened on paying taxes, the government did. They were the only taxpayers. So, they had to take up this burden of high tax payment, which they could not afford. So, not only were they put in trouble and misery, they were also discriminated socially, and they were not accepted as equals with the others. So during this time, the population of France was growing, and this exerted great pressure on food production, which did not increase in proportion to demand. This led to rise in price of bread, which was their staple food, and since salary did not increase, the people found it difficult to even buy food. Especially the very mere wage earners. They were given fixed salaries which never increased according to the rise in prices. So there was a big gap now between the rich and the poor people. The situation worsened with crop failures, and this led to the subsistence crisis, which is really a bad situation where the basic means of livelihood of people is in danger or is in threat. And the survival of these people is a big question mark. How will they survive without enough money in hand, without being able to buy enough food, and their crops are damaged or they get only poor production? So they are in a really bad situation. So who is the ruler now? Louis XVI. So life became very difficult for common people under the strict rule of Louis XVI. His policies were so strict and harsh, which they found it very difficult to obey. Until then, it was these poor illiterate people or the peasants who did not have very good ideas, nor did they have any money with them. They held unorganized revolts and protests against the rule of the king, which the king found it very easy to take control of. He suppressed these revolts. So, in the 18th century, what happened? A new class of people called the middle class, a new class of people called the middle class. They emerged or came up in France. These people were the ones who now earned wealth through expanding their international trade and exporting woolen and silk textiles. So now they have become a wealthier group in the society of France. By now, I had already told you, it was not just the poor people that who were part of the third estate. There were also some learned men, lawyers, government officials who were a bit educated than the others, better educated than the others. So these people, they understood that. They also became aware that the social structure of the society of France was not correctly done. That is, the privilege by birth was given to two sections of the society, and that was wrong. In any society, a person's status must depend on merit. So now we have two groups of people, the wealthier middle class and the peasants, who were now in the same path, having difficulties with the rule of the king, and they were trying to find ways to put an end to that kind of rule. So they came together and they decided to jointly protest against or revolt against the French government. So now, here comes the role of philosophers. The role of philosophers. They played a good role here. So these social thinkers wrote in their books about the social and administrative issues related to France and its society. Those who were able to read it and were inspired by these thinkings and ideas. So they were trying to put forward to the people, they should go for a society based on freedom, equality and opportunities for all. So this became a common topic for talk. People, they for themselves thought about it. When they got together, discussed about it. Usually this was done in coffee shops and through newspapers and magazines. For those who could not read, whatever they decided upon, whatever the writings, it was read aloud to them. The political thinkers, while they wrote about this, they took the American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights as an example to write and speak to the people about the importance and goodness of having their own constitution and them being granted rights. Now, what did the philosophers propose to them? Try to make the people understand what was the idea put forward by the social thinkers. We have three social thinkers, JeanJacques Rousseau and Montesquieu. The first one, John Locke, he criticized John Locke in his book, The Two Treatises of Government. He criticized about the policy of absolute right of the monarch. That is, he wrote against the single-handed rule by the monarch in France. The next one, JeanJacques Rousseau, in his book Social Contract, he talked about a government based on social contract between people and their representatives. Did we hear about this anywhere before? A government based or a government made by the people and their representatives working for them. Yes, it is the democracy, is it not? The democracy we learned in the last lesson. So he was trying indirectly to stress and emphasize on that it was time for France and its people to think about having an elected government, which he further stressed on again in his book, saying that if the representatives are not liked by the people, then there is every chance for them to be removed. What is that about democracy? A unique feature of democracy. Ruled by the people. If not satisfied, you can remove them. That is, choose and change. That was the freedom given to the citizens of a democratic country. Through the election process, choose. If not, if you dislike, change them. The third person, Montesquieu, in his book, The Spirit of the Laws. Montesquieu, in his book, The Spirit of Laws, what did he state? He said about sharing of power. He stressed about sharing of power between the three organs of government. Which are the three organs of government? Legislature, executive, judiciary. So they are the three hands of the government, which helps the government to function effectively. One makes laws for the country, the other tries to implement it, and the other makes sure that the citizens are allowed to enjoy their fundamental rights and the laws are correctly practiced. If not, the people can approach the courts. So they all together, independently, work on the responsibilities given to them, and at the same time, they together work for the betterment of the country and its people. So this man, Montesquieu, he also said about the kind of government that the new independent American colonies have adopted. That is, it must be this form of government. So from all what these three philosophers talked to the people of France, what can we understand? They were stressing on the need for France to have a society based on freedom, equal laws and opportunities for all its citizens alike. So while the people were busy listening to these people and trying to think about how to bring about changes in their country, the king was also not sitting there idle. He was thinking about how to get revenue, how to get money to continue with the daily needs of the country. And the news that Louis XVI, the then ruler of France, had planned for increasing and introducing new taxes to meet the state's expenses angered the people, and public protest became common against the system of privileges. So he planned for what? He planned for introducing and increasing taxes. Introduce new taxes and increase the existing taxes. For what? To meet the expenses of the state. This angered the people of France, and public protest became common against the system of privileges, and gradually this led to the outbreak of the revolution. Understood? This is the first part of the lesson. What can be the reasons? What were the reasons for the French Revolution to happen? People being dissatisfied totally with the rule being in the hands of one single person. At that time it was Louis XVI. How they were discriminated, how a certain section of the people were discriminated in the society. The philosophers keeping on telling the people, speaking to the people, trying to convince them that it is time that you think for having a government of your own, made by yourselves, A government made by yourselves for your own good, to take care of yourselves. How the ruler and his policies were strict. So all this led to the people could no more hold back. So this led to the outbreak of the revolution. Understood?